What's up, y'all? Welcome back to my channel. This is Health and Fit Pros United. I am King Rod. So we are going to go into the second part of this video. All right, the second part of this presentation. If you didn't watch the first part, I implore you to go watch the first part. Once this part is over, I'm going to leave it in the description, or you can it'll pop up at the end of the video. Okay, so basically, before I get into what we're doing today, the reason why I created this channel is to help educate health and fit pros and unite the health and fit pros, specifically massage therapists and future massage therapists, really mostly future massage therapists, and also personal trainers, fitness instructors, health coaches, life coaches, whatever the case is. Okay, so I really wanted to get a channel and a place where you could come and you can keep up with your education. It actually helps me too, because I'm able to keep up with my education as well. Because a lot of times what happens is, you go to school or you take a certification or whatever the case is, and you don't always retain everything that you learn, and you don't always have to apply everything you learn. All right, so with that being said, we're going to be going into the second part of this workshop. Okay, so I broke it down into two workshops. So this workshop, we're going to be focused more on planes of motion and anatomical movement. This is just a refresher. I will have more in-depth videos as we go along. Okay, so with the MBLEX, this is going to be very important for you guys to study and remember, because this is like the foundation of movement. Okay, this is the foundation of movement. So in terms of when we go into everything, when we talk about, for example, proximal, distal, when you're talking about sagittal plane, frontal plane, and all that stuff, it's going to be very important that you understand medial, lateral, the difference between those things, superior, inferior, infra, supra, all those different things. All right, so let's get into it. All right, there are three planes of motion that the body moves in, which is the sagittal, frontal plane, and the transverse plane. Forgive me for any typos. I'll make sure I fix that. All right, so anatomical position is defined as the positioning of the body when it's standing upright and facing forward, with palms facing forward and each arm hanging on each side of the body. Very important when you are talking about anatomical movements from the anatomical position. So imagine yourself standing straight up with your arms to the side, palms facing forward. That is anatomical position. The sagittal plane is also called the median plane. The frontal plane is also called the coronal plane, and the transverse plane is also called the horizontal plane. If you take the MBLEX and you see, or any test that talks about planes of motion, but especially the MBLEX, they may hit you with median, coronal, or horizontal plane. So make sure you know the difference between the three. All right. Anytime these movements are referenced, like I said earlier, it's from the anatomical position. Okay. Planes of motion now. We have the sagittal plane, the horizontal plane, and the frontal plane. Or in this case, the sagittal plane. This will be called, if not the horizontal, the transverse plane. And then the frontal plane is also called, like we said earlier, the coronal plane. Okay. This is anatomical position. Okay, so anytime we're referring to any anatomical movements, we're talking about from this position. So it doesn't count if your palms are facing your body. It only counts if your palms are facing forward. Okay. Beware of the mid-sagittal plane. So this really surprised me when I took the test, and even when I was studying, because in my personal training career, or when I was even taking the test for my personal training certification, there was no mention of the mid-sagittal plane. This is something that I won't say is new, has been around, but I was surprised when this came up. So understand that the sagittal plane divides the body into two halves, left and right, and we'll get into that. But the mid-sagittal plane is specifically in the middle of the body. Okay, so make sure you understand that. Okay. Sagittal plane movements, like I said earlier, divides the body into two halves, which is left and right. It includes movements such as flexion, extension, and gait. Gait means walking, jogging movements. Okay? So imagine your elbow, flexing your elbow, bringing it up 90 degrees or beyond 90, and then extending it back down. That's flexion. And then, that's flexion, and then bringing it back down is extension. Okay, here are examples like I've just mentioned earlier. The wrist also, you can see here, we're flexing the wrist and extending the wrist. That's why at the bottom here, these are called your flexors, and at the top here, these are called your extensors. Okay? Frontal plane or coronal plane divides the body into two halves, which is anterior and posterior. Movements include abduction, adduction, or as some people say, abduction and adduction, elevation, depression, inversion, eversion of the ankle, lateral or medial movements, except except lateral or medial rotation. Okay, and we'll talk about that earlier. Ulnar or radial deviation. Okay, give you a few examples of abduction and adduction. Abduction, away from the body, or abducting. That's a good way to remember the difference between abduction and adduction. And then adduction, you're adding back to towards the midline of the body. Okay, so that would be, think of side to side movement. Any side movement typically would be considered in the frontal plane. Okay, transverse plane, think of the body being divided into superior and inferior halves, and movements include rotation, circumduction, horizontal abduction or adduction, supination, pronation, and any other twisting movements. Okay, so think about any rotational or twisting movements. That would be your transverse plane movements. Okay, transverse or horizontal plane movements. Here are a couple of examples: lateral rotation and medial rotation. Okay. All right, here are some other terms, anatomical terms, directions, and examples. All right, so I mentioned earlier proximal and distal. Proximal is closest to the center of the body. Distal is the furthest away from the center of the body. Okay, so think of proximal as like approximate, right? Like if you're close to a place or you're close to a destination, you're going to say I'm approximately 10 minutes away, which means you're on your way towards the destination. Okay, distal, think of distance, like you're trying to create distance away from the destination. Okay, so I like to use little context clues and examples to help you to know exactly which one is the difference between the two. Medial, lateral. Okay, medial is closest to the midline of the body. Think of medial as middle. Okay, closest to the middle of the body. Lateral will be going away from the middle of the body. Okay, superior. Think of superior as someone standing over you. Okay, trying to assert dominance over you. That would make them your quote unquote superior. Inferior, someone is beneath you, below you. Okay, inferior to you. Think of things like that. When you think of these anatomical terms, try to use context clues to help you remember the difference between all of them. Okay, again, we're going to create another video that will be completely separate. This is just a refresher. Okay, all right, so let's go over some quizzes. All right, so let's do a quiz, quick little pop quiz. All right, so based on all the information I gave you, in anatomical position, what side of the body is what side of the body is the thumb position in anatomical position? Would it be the inferior side, lateral side, medial side, or none of the above? So if you went to my first workshop, we talked about process of elimination. Okay, so there's no such thing as an inferior side, right? They can't eliminate one of the answers immediately. Inferior side would not be the answer. Okay, because inferior would not be a side per se, right? It's above or below. So we can eliminate that. This one is pretty easy though. Lateral side is the answer. Okay, it can't be the medial side because that would mean it's closer to the middle of the body. Okay, and then it can't be none of the above, simply just because we have an answer here. Okay, All right, number 2. Which movement is not in the sagittal plane? Okay, it is not in the sagittal plane. All right, so again, context clues, reading the question, trying to find the answer within the question. So it says is not. Okay, we have A, extension, B, flexion, C, abduction, D, gait. Okay, so if you remember, which movements are in the sagittal plane, we only named 3: flexion, extension, and gait. Therefore, based on our selections here, there can only be one correct answer. Okay, and that answer would be abduction. Okay, so this one is an easy one because the sagittal plane only has 3 movements. All the other planes of motion have several movements that you can do. So those are a little bit more difficult to remember. But again, context clues. When think of sagittal plane, think of forward and back, okay? So even with flexion and extension, it's forward and back, right? Or back and forward, okay? Gait, think of walking forward or walking backwards, right? That's pretty much it, the movements within the sagittal plane. Okay, the same thing would be for the hip or the knee. If you were to flex the knee, that would be flex the knee, and that knee is coming up towards your chest. That would be a sagittal plane movement. Okay. All right. This one's going to be not too hard. Which plane of motion is this movement seen in this picture? A, frontal. B, flexion. C, sagittal. D, transverse. Immediately, we should be eliminating one of these answers immediately because it asks which plane of motion is this movement in the picture seen in the picture. Excuse me. Again, excuse the typos. I thought I corrected this. All right, so this one you're going to eliminate and answer immediately. Flexion, okay? Because flexion is an anatomical term. All right, so that cannot be the correct answer. All right, next, we're going to be eliminating another one. Another one you should have eliminated already is transverse, because transverse is a rotational movement, right? That's a rotational movement. She's not rotating in this picture. She's simply lifting the leg up from the side and back down. So now you have 2 remaining answers. You have sagittal and frontal. Now, we just said that the sagittal plane is forward and back, right? So there's only could be one correct answer, and that is the frontal plane. This movement is in the frontal plane, and she is performing abduction, okay? All right, so this was, if you did the last webinar, this question, you should be able to answer this question. If you didn't, go check out the video, but let's go through it. Which rotator cuff muscles have actions and movements in the transverse plane? A, supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor. B, teres major, teres minor, infraspinatus. C, subscapularis, teres minor, and infraspinatus. Or D, the subscapularis, teres major, and the teres minor. All right, so 2 of these responses should be eliminated immediately. Why? Because the question asks which rotator cuff muscles. So, question, is the teres major a rotator cuff muscle? Yes or no? The answer is no. It is not a rotator cuff muscle. Therefore, any answer or any choice that has the rotator cuff in it should be eliminated. I'm sorry. Any answer that has the teres major in it should be eliminated immediately. So that means we're going to eliminate B and D. So now we only have 2 choices. We have A or C. So now question, what movement does the supraspinatus do? The supraspinatus performs abduction, right? So if it performs abduction, which plane is it in? You see how I'm doing these questions? You just went back. You just had a question similar to this where we talked about abduction, right? And which plane is in. So if you know supraspinatus does abduction and is in the frontal plane, therefore this choice cannot be the correct answer. So the only answer could be C, subscapularis, which performs medial or internal rotation, teres minor, and infraspinatus, which both perform external or lateral rotation. All right, here we go. Another one. If you were to flex your hip and then externally rotate your hip, which two planes of motion would you be crossing? A, frontal and sagittal. B, sagittal and transverse. C, transverse and frontal. D, proximal and distal. Okay, so I the way I framed this question, I did it in a way where you can think about that motion, and I put it in the choices in that order. So I actually just talked about this earlier, right? I said flexing the hip, right? Or the knee. Flexing the hip, what plane of motion are you in? Think about it. When you turn, we just went over this in the last question. When you turn or rotate, which plane of motion are you in? Before we get to the answer, one of these choices should be immediately eliminated. Proximal and distal. D. Why? Because that is not a plane of motion. Those are anatomical terms. So therefore, we're going to eliminate that answer. Okay? Another one that we're going to, we should have already gotten the answer, but let's look at this, right? So frontal plane has side-to-side movements, right? So abduction, adduction, moving side to side. When you flex the hip and then externally rotate, are you moving side to side? Are you doing any abduction or adduction? No, you're not. Therefore, A and C cannot be the correct answer, even though they have sagittal and transverse in it. So it can only be one correct answer, which would be B, sagittal, because the hip goes into flexion, and then transverse, and then goes into external rotation. Okay? All right. So we are almost done with this. We're going to just do a little pop quiz right quick. All right. Again, this is just a refresher. I'm going to have more videos coming up. Okay. So, oops. Actually, there will not be a pop quiz. Okay. So, when I did this workshop before, guys, when I did this thing before, it was a lot longer because I used to do presentations when I used to be a TA. Okay. So the reason why I had a pop quiz is because this was a whole presentation. So I eliminated the pop quiz from it seems. Matter of fact, let's see if it's actually on here. It actually might be on here, I think. Let's see if it's on here. Nope, it's not. All right, so we are pretty much done with this video. Okay, I apologize. I thought I had the slideshow. All right, so no slideshow. No pop quiz today. All right, so basically this is the end of the video. But what I want to say is this. Let's go back right quick. Let's just go back because I want to show you guys something. Okay. So it's going to be very important for you guys to understand the difference in these planes. When I first started training, it took a while for me to really grasp it. I don't know why, because now it's pretty easy. But a lot of people get confused with these planes of motion because they try to associate the division of the lines with how that division is how that division causes that plane of motion. I don't know. I just created. I didn't create this, to be honest with you, but I understand it. Okay, I understand it. All right. So, in order for you guys to get better at understanding these things, try not to overcomplicate it. That's the simplest way I can help you with this. don't overcomplicate it. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. And I'm usually don't tell people not to question stuff, but you know, this here, ask questions, but don't question it per se. It's not like somebody is trying to gaslight you when it comes to like the anatomical terms and stuff like that. Okay? And as a matter of fact, let's do this right quick. My internet service is not great. So let's code terms. Let's see if we could look up some more anatomical terms. I spelled that wrong. All right, let's go to an image so we can see more anatomical terms. All right. So we got this one here. Let's click on it. All right, let's see if we can zoom in. All right, and let's scroll down. All right, so I want you guys to look at something here, right? Because these are some, most of these terms we went over already. One of them you will probably see, ventral, which is right here to the right side. I have my arrow here, ventral. Okay, and dorsal. Ventral means the front of the body. Dorsal means the back of the body. Another one that you may see as you go down, follow me, where it says superior, I'll highlight it so you guys can see. Where it says superior, they have a term called cephalad, okay? This term as you see, refers to the location closer to the patient's head. And in comparison, it says inferior caudal means or refers to a location closer to the patient's feet. Okay? So when you think of the whole body, well, we already went over superior and inferior, but let's just think, there's another, again, they may hit you with other terms, okay? They may hit you with other terms. So cephalad would be closer to the head, and caudal would be closer to the feet or inferior. Okay, so it's just another way of saying superior or inferior. Here we have deep and superficial. Okay, so you're definitely going to see this. Okay, you're definitely going to see this. Superficial means closer to the surface. Deep means further away from the surface of the body. So, for an example, when we talk about muscles like the trapezius, right? The trapezius is the more superficial muscle in the back. Okay, so it is the latissimus dorsi. Okay, but under your trapezius, and specifically the upper to middle trapezius, is the rhomboid, right? So the rhomboids would be deep. Okay, so you may get a question that asks you, hey, which of these two muscles is more superficial, the trapezius or the rhomboids? You're going to have to know that the trapezius is more superficial and the rhomboids are more deep. Okay, so again, I'm going to do a whole presentation with this. I just have to come up with it. I just happen to have the slideshow available for me, and I told my friend I would get started with doing these videos, so here we go. All right, so be on the lookout for more videos. My goal is to post 2 videos a week. That's my goal. It just takes time for me to put the presentations together, so just be patient with me, but we're gonna get these videos up. All right, so I'm gonna get a lot of good information for y'all, so just stay tuned. All right, if you like the video, enjoyed the video, please comment below your thoughts. If you have any questions, please comment below, and just be on the lookout for this channel to grow, this page to grow. If someone needs to be sent these videos, please make sure you send it to them, whoever's taking the MBLEX, or who just needs the information to be broken down to them. Okay, I thank y'all so much. Talk to you soon.